Hello, campers and youth participating here today. Welcome to Digital Youth Future Talks. My name is Abdullah Rafi, and I am your Digital Youth Program Specialist. And today we are joined by Nicole Woodland. And to give you an example of what Future Talks is and what we're doing here today, it's all about connecting to industry experts within Calgary to really demystify what is digital. What are we talking about? Who are these people? Some questions about tech, but also, what does it mean to be in those industries? What does it look like to be in those day-to-day jobs at the end of the day? So we're joined by Nicole Woodland. Nicole is a professional engineer with a background in geological engineering, where data analysis, visualizations, and data storytelling are an integral part of her success supporting balanced development in the energy industry. Her interest for advancing technology and finding relationships in data led her into the technology sector in 2019, where she now uses technology, coding, and analytics to support multiple companies and not-for-profits, alongside instructing machine learning to others interested in this exciting and in-demand field. She strongly believes in making technology accessible and understandable to anyone curious about pursuing data science as a career, or just for fun. So a really cool story there, Nicole. You didn't always start in tech, which is interesting to see.
Yeah.
You transitioned into it, but I'll pass it off to you. What's your story? Tell us.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a big question, but yeah, so I didn't necessarily start in tech, but I've always been interested in technology. I was actually exceptionally lucky, and when I was little, I had a grandfather that was very, very interested in computers. He worked at a college and he taught automotive mechanics. So very hands-on, very working with mechanical physical things. And the time when he was there, he was very senior, he was very good at what he did, and computers were starting to come into the automotive world. So he got one of the first glimpses of that, and he thought that was just the most amazing thing. And he was all over that. And the moment he could, I think it was actually like a refurbished computer from the college, probably, that got retired quickly because technology was just like today, changing so fast that there was a lot of turnover. And so he got to bring one home. And so when I was very young, I got to play on a Tandy computer, and it did a lot of incredible things like run DOS and print in one color and run off little tiny square discs or diskettes. And I thought it was the most incredible magic box that you could possibly have. And so I pretty much learned the alphabet on the keyboard and learned how to spell doing that. And it was really, really cool. So my first introduction to computers was really courtesy of my grandfather. And when that computer didn't meet his needs very quickly for him, I actually got to bring it home, and I had this giant computer sitting in my room that I could do one thing on. So it's always kind of been a part of my life. And what's really interesting about that is, as I went through university and then went to through high school and then into university, I did actually think I was going to do something different than what I ended up doing. So that's another story, but always kind of veered on the side of technology. So I took coding in high school. I was the only girl in my class. I took the tech course in high school. I was the only girl in my class doing woodworking and learning a little bit about the automotive stuff. I was often the only one, and that was kind of strange, but kind of neat in a way to know that I was learning something that other people like me weren't doing. So I really enjoyed it. And I was actually really lucky that a few of those teachers were actually female. So I had some really great role models there as well. So I went to university and thought I was going to do something. I was in engineering, and I realized that I really loved geology. The program I went to Queen's, and part of the reason that I chose that school was it actually has a common first year. So you apply to engineering at Queen's and everybody takes the same first year courses. You don't have to decide immediately what you want to specialize in. And so it gave you some time to actually try out the different courses and see what you wanted to do. And I fell in love with the geosciences, and more from the perspective that it helped me understand the world that we live in. what is it, this big sphere that we are part of this giant ecosystem, and how does it work beyond what we can see, what's happening, why do the things happen around us, and how can we harness the power, how can we make it, how can we be part of that system and use it to help society. So that's why I was really interested in geoscience. Now, the cool thing is in engineering versus plain geology, not plain geology, but pure geology, sorry, not offending anybody, pure geology, the focus is a little bit different. So in engineering, I got to apply a lot of those technical skills that I'd been kind of pulling along all the way through. So instead of just mapping and making models of the subsurface, we were applying another layer of that. We were using computers to make a model of a landfill, for example, and model how we could put the different layers of different types of clays or plastics or polymers, whatever it is, to seal off the bottom of those landfills and model how that would behave over time. So the engineering was a really lovely blend of learning about the earth and being able to work with the earth in the way that it is, and bring in the technology side of it. So that's how I ended up there. My family actually moved to Calgary from Ontario, so I followed them and ended up in the energy industry. And that was actually really important to me. I wanted to know that I was part of the process. I wanted to know that I could use my heart and my mind to help make the decisions that companies are making when they're developing resources. And that was really, really important to me. I wanted to be part of that. So I got to do that for about 10 years, and that was awesome. And then I had a family. So I have 2 little kiddos. Oh my gosh, they're not little anymore. I should stop saying that. They are growing up very quickly. Yeah, and a number of years ago, I had a chance to really kind of switch gears a little bit, step away a little bit from the geoscience and really start to focus on the tech. It was calling me back. And what I got pulled into was machine learning, and it's unbelievably eye-opening, incredible to learn about, and super powerful. So that's what I'm doing now. So now I have spent the last 3.5 years learning more about tech and coding and programming and that whole entire ecosystem and the amazing support and community that we have in tech in Calgary and collectively Alberta as well. Edmonton is an incredible machine learning hub. It's recognized globally. So Alberta is a fantastic place to be if you're interested in the tech industry. As far as that, yes, so now I teach machine learning, which is not something I ever thought I would be doing 5 years ago. But yeah, I'm really passionate about being able to make that accessible to folks, and whether you want to include it in your current career, because machine learning is everywhere, whether you want to include it in your career, make it your entire career, or it's something you just want to try out because you want to make your own video game or something like that. I'm here, and I really like giving people the building blocks to help do that. And I help other companies do analytics and set up their data and that kind of stuff as well. So I've got lots of different projects on the go. It's a very nimble, kind of flexible, keep track of, organize and priorities, and it's very exciting and different every single day. And yeah, so that's where I'm at.
Awesome, Nicole. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing the story. And we went through like almost your whole timeline in career. So I love talking about the story of your grandfather, kind of inspiring you there.
Yeah.
Those years. I do want to touch upon those, those barriers for entry, maybe for females or the minority in tech. So I'd love to touch upon that. But then going through your university career, I took a couple of geology classes. Probably not to the extent you did, but it's really cool that passion and that wanting to understand how things work, then translating that also into the tech industry and sort of keeping those same passions, but it's a different scope, but same sort of capacity to learn. And
yes,
it's really cool to hear that as well. Let's go all the way back to high school, all the way back to when you began, sort of where our campers, our audience are sitting right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you get into it? You talked about your grandfather, but did you feel like there was this barrier for you to entry? You had to push past that, or was it a pretty easy transition into that STEM technology field?
So high school is a little bit different, right? I mean, the courses are open to everyone.
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you you can't take a course. But it was a little strange being the only one, but I had good friends that were in both, um, not both, multiple groups. And there's a lot of crossover. I played music as well. So I was in the band. So there's a lot of friends that I had that were in the band that were also in these other courses. We had a pretty tight high school. We were a pretty cohesive group of it wasn't a huge school. So a lot of us knew each other, but it was definitely, you noticed it. You noticed that you're the only one, but the group of people that I was with, they were all very supportive, and it's not like any of the other students were calling me out for being there or anything like that. So yeah, it was a positive experience.
Okay. And was that learning of like tech and coding, was it fostered only within school, or did you do other things, extracurriculars? Did you kind of do an internship? Was there anything outside of that school sphere?
I think at the time it wasn't really on the radar.
Mhm.
So even though we had the computers, the internet was still coming of age. It's I didn't have the internet until grade 8,
Okay,
grade
wow,
9.
yeah.
So in our house, anyways, we had access to it a little bit at school, but we didn't have our own internet. We had dial-up for a couple of years. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that. It's a little different.
Yeah, yeah.
It's slow. So we had dial-up to start with, and there wasn't a whole lot you could really do.
Mhm.
There wasn't the online ecosystem the way that it exists today. So that whole, like, groups like yours, it just wasn't the same. If you took coding or tech in grade school, it was probably typing. We had a little bit of coding. One of my friends' dads actually was a computer software coder engineer, I believe. I think he was an engineer. And he came into one of our classes, I think around like grade 4 or grade 5, and taught
Wow.
us like a tiny bit of like C+ or something like that. So like, 30 minutes of coding. So like these little bits of exposure where you see it and it just excites you, and it allows you to see what's behind the scenes. How do the things that we engage with and don't even think about anymore, how is it made? How do they do that? So yeah, there was lots of just little sparks along the way. Extracurriculars, I was pretty busy. I was a sports person. So I actually played hockey.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I played a lot of hockey. So actually I refereed as well. So I wasn't doing a whole lot of internships, I guess,
Mhm.
when I was in high school. But I kind of wish it had existed. I think it would have given me a little bit more of a window into what I was getting myself into
Yeah,
going into
sure.
university.
And
So
I think it's a
yeah,
unique perspective you come with because you kind of grew up with the technology growing up with you, whereas
yeah,
campers and today they're almost digital natives, right? There's an expectation
yes.
of learning and expectation of a basic knowledge. So it's a little bit different there. But what we always like to chat about is sort of that career pathway. So you
Mhm.
talked about geology, you talked about now into machine learning. But when you go back to high school, was that in the cards, or was it something else? Because sometimes we talk about, I want to be a marine biologist like every other kid, and then eventually
Nope.
you're something else, right? So what did that look like for you?
I don't think I even knew what the term machine learning was. There was no social media, there was no Netflix, there was no Spotify, there was no Google even. It was just kind of starting. The world was very different.
Mhm.
And so people were doing it. Researchers have been working on machine learning for quite a long time, actually, and the philosophy behind the math of that has been around since the 30s.
Wow. Yeah.
So quite a long time, actually. But the the new computers, what we have now, the ability, the speed, the amount of memory that our computers can hold now, and the amount of data that is being collected everywhere has really opened up what we call big data and has allowed machine learning to really take off. So none of that existed. It is not a career that I would have even known about. It certainly wasn't something that would show up in your like what you should be when you grow up test in your like civics course or whatever it is. It didn't exist. And that's actually going to be true even for all these folks in this room here. I can't remember the exact statistic, but a large percentage of jobs that will be available 10, 20, 30 years from now, they don't even exist right now. So
yeah, super exciting to see what's on the horizon, or to not know what's on the horizon, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah.
So very fascinating there. I wanted to ask, so we mentioned machine learning a couple times, but I guess if you were to break it down for us, what is machine learning and how do you apply it specifically?
Yeah, so machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence. We are specifically looking at using data sets to help us make decisions. So that's really kind of the broad, what are we trying to do? So whether it's something, I use Netflix because most people know what it is. When Netflix first started, it gave you a list of shows. And I know there was many people, and we used to joke about this, like, oh yeah, I was looking at Netflix last night and it took me 45 minutes to choose something to watch, so I went to bed instead. And it's not like that anymore. Netflix has a machine learning model built into it that gives you recommendations now. And it's pretty good because Netflix has been pretty successful. And so what it does is it gives you a very curated user experience, and that's all because of the machine learning model. So take data about you as an individual user, the types of shows that you've engaged in, and it compares you with other users, and it compares the shows that you've watched with other similar shows, and it puts it all in a big pot, uses a whole bunch of math, and your recommendations show up at the beginning of your list on the screen. And that's, in a nutshell, one of the things that machine learning can do. It's also in a million different places. It's checking bank transactions. When you go tap your debit card, there's a machine learning model trying to see, make sure that, yeah, we're pretty confident that Joey is using the card at the store and is buying a pack of gum, and not somebody trying to steal money from your bank account. So there's machine learning models happening there. You're interacting with that, whether you realize or like it or not. So they're there. You type a word into Google, that's a machine learning model happening in the background to return your search results. What else? You use your facial recognition or your fingerprint scan to unlock your phone or your computer. That's all machine learning. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Every industry it's touching. I'm seeing it in construction. It's in traffic. It's in video games. It's in art. It's in technology, obviously. Assistive technologies, so like text to speech, speech to text, all those types of things. It's all over the place. All over the place.
Yeah, we were exploring Dolly with the group before. I'm not sure if it was this group, but that whole concept of giving this machine learning platform a string of words, and then it just develops the art based on the text you give it.
Yes.
Where I was watching a video and it said, you know, this machine learning platform can create more art than we have in a whole civilization since humans existed in about a couple of hours. So
Incredible.
crazy to think how accelerated we be and be sort of amplified with machine learning supporting us in that respect. So
yeah,
super cool to think about. But what does that look like in your day-to-day job? Like, what are you,
yes.
It's a question that we always ask. Like, if we're talking about demystifying, you do machine learning, we kind of understand it. Well, you get to work, you grab your coffee. Well, what are you doing?
Yeah, so my day looks a little bit different than probably many other folks that have the same title that I do, just because I'm kind of a little bit more in what you might describe as like the freelance or the entrepreneurial side of it. and I teach as well. So it's just a little bit different, but I have worked as an analyst. I have worked as an engineer. When I was working as an analyst, it's a typical job in the energy. We were still kind of fringe energy, but in the tech industry, you often meet with your group in the morning. So we often call that a stand up. So everyone kind of comes together, you meet for a couple of minutes, talk about what the priorities are for the day, what the goals are for that day to finish often for that week. We call that section of time a sprint, sprint to the finish. It's not always a sprint. But so, yeah, so you get together, you grab your coffee, you have your meeting with your team, and then you go about completing your tasks for that day. That was more of an analyst role that I'm talking about. So not as much machine learning, but it was coming for that company. So it's on their radar. But to integrate machine learning into that type of job, you're really looking at coding. So you have to know how to code. You have to know how to look at data. You have to be creative because you have to be able to think inside the box, right? What is my model actually trying to do? But also outside the box, what am I missing? What data aren't I accounting for? What is this model going to be used for? And is it appropriate? Am I missing the mark? Is my client or my employer going to be happy with the results? How do I check that? So even though it's coding, there's still a high level of creativity because there's a whole pipeline that feeds into that machine learning model. Machine learning engineers actually spend about 70 to 80% of their time just working with data. So you gotta like spreadsheets, you gotta like tables, you gotta like finding the little details, figuring out why something's missing or corrupted, or who put some weird thing as a null value in their database, things like that. And a lot of being a machine learning engineer is really understanding the problem. What am I trying to achieve? What data do I have? What am I missing? Can I get the outcome that our team or my client wants? And then actually go ahead, build that model, make a proof of concept, validate it, and then deliver it to your team or your client so that they can integrate it into whatever system they're trying to integrate it into. Some machine learning engineers have that full spectrum where they can do that last part of it. I usually stop there, handing it off, because I'm not a computer engineer. But yeah, you spend most of your day working with data, making sure that's going to be relevant for your model, and then feeding it in, and then getting that model working. So yeah, that's kind of what your typical day looks like. For me right now, it's a little bit different. I am looking at data on an individual basis for each company, trying to put out fires and solve problems, make sure that that data can be continually used going forward. I write little scripts to try and make their day-to-day businesses a little bit easier without having to like buy a whole nother software suite that's super expensive that you only need one tiny little thing from. So I do a lot of stuff like that. And then preparing for my classes and trying to make that the best experience that I can for my students. So, and then teaching. So
awesome. I love that, you have to code, you have to be interested in this, but there's also that problem solving aspect, right? Something that you need to look inside the box, outside the box, what is working, what isn't working. And, it's not just about the coding, but it's also about being creative. So I love you bringing that aspect up. Yeah. So if I'm listening to and I'm really resonating, and this is something that, wow, like I want to do this, what's your advice for someone in high school that's going into post-secondary that then, they want to do an internship, or what's that journey look like for juniors that are in that machine learning world?
Yeah, code, just get in there and do it. There are so many resources available out there right now. Take the coding classes at school. If you don't have them at school, or doesn't work in your timetable, you can find them other ways. There are so many places. Gordon teaches, has programs for students, for example, but there are so many out there. There are many that are free, and just get in there and do it. Coding is one of those things. It's kind of like playing the piano. You learn it, you don't really forget it, but you kind of got to keep doing it, or it kind of gets a little blurry. And so having that coding background already down before you go into a university type program will give you a huge advantage. It doesn't really matter what language, honestly. The building blocks are all the same. And it's that logical thought process to think like a programmer. Whether you're building a website or doing machine learning or straight up analytics or building a dashboard for somebody or using it with financial data to build a report for someone down the road, or building an environmental model of some kind, that ability to think through the steps in the order that you need to process the data in some way and achieve an outcome is the same. It's all the same. And the building blocks are the same. You got to know how to print to the screen. You got to know how to make a decision in code. So something like a conditional statement, an if statement, if you will. You got to know how to use loops. You got to know how to do simple calculations. You got to know how to move data from one place to another. And yeah, the words, exactly how you will do that in each language, the syntax might be different, but the process, the way that your brain is thinking through doing that process, that workflow is the same. So just code, get in there and try it, and join a club or a team. I've talked to some folks that are doing really cool machine learning stuff right now, and I've asked them this very same question, because I'm always curious. How did you get into machine learning? Because I'm like, this is how I got here. How did you do it? And a lot of them, you're right, were in the coding clubs and competitions in high school or university. They met friends. They've had connections with those folks, and they've led to jobs down the road. So those relationships that you make in school, outside of school, in your community are super valuable down the road as well.
Well, that's great advice. And I think everybody watching today is already sort of on that journey in coding and having that passion for it. So great advice there. The last question I always like to lead off, at least for my questions before we jump over to everybody else's, is, what's something on the horizon of tech or the digital world, whether it be machine learning or something else that you think is going to be the big thing or the thing that really excites you that maybe people can look into? Sort of like, let's look into, 2030, 2040. What's that cool thing that excites you?
Oh gosh. That is a big question. I am not a philosopher. If predicting things was my forte, I wouldn't be. But I think food security is going to be a big one, and water security are going to be huge, especially here actually in Alberta. If you dig deep into water issues in Alberta, it's a can of worms. And so coming up with technologies to make those as resourceful, it's a bad word, but as efficient, as use as little as we can, make things use less resource. That is to everybody's benefit, and we can do that, and machine learning is starting to do that actually. Machine learning is really big in agriculture, and we're using it to target where we fertilize, where we water, where we use herbicides or pesticides, and that has a huge environmental impact. That's massive. If you can cut down your water cost even by like 10 or 15%, that's a massive savings, not only financially for the farmer, but on the environmental scale. So I see tech moving into a food and water security, energy as well, as we shift to renewables. There's a huge geothermal movement happening in Alberta, and tech is going to be following in there pretty quick, and medicine as well. So those are the areas where I see it really starting to, I think, have a bigger imprint. There's really cool things happening. Like there's people growing mushrooms in shipping containers, and we're using AI to plant seeds and water stuff. And yeah, super cool. So
for putting you on the spot, potential. That's what a great answer that was, because I think that's so great. Like I was talking to another industry connection about them using drones to map out fields to then look at the topography and everything, and even the sort of where the crops are sitting, where they should fertilize, where they should water, using machine learning there as well. Also, another person using IoT devices in cows and then putting it through a machine learning model to then check their gut health, if they're pregnant or not, what they should do next, when they should do health checkups. So yeah, lots of different places. That idea of technology and sustainability, super, super cool.
Yeah, there's another one, actually, I'll just jump in real quick. There's another one I came across in Australia. There is I believe it's a fish that's an invasive species in their like isolated water communities, and it's propagating out of control, and it's really destroying the environments because it uses up all the oxygen, and then none of the native species can survive. And they couldn't figure out how to get rid of the species, because if they use if they just catch everything, then they're also catching the native species. If they put in a chemical, then they're going to kill all the native species, right? It's going to have a negative impact on the entire ecosystem. So what they actually did was they went back to the original environment of this fish, figured out what its predator was, designed an artificial one, put an AI system in it, and let it go to town. So basically this little robot in these lakes harass these fish to the point that they don't breed, they're not laying eggs because they're so harassed by their predators that it's almost completely wiped out this invasive species in this little ecosystem. That is incredible.
That's that's a bizarre story. Maybe there's like ethical considerations if that's used in like a different approach, but an interesting application of artificial intelligence. So that's really interesting.
But no negative impact on the rest of the ecosystem, right? Like in terms of removing that invasive species. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. You're right. There's a whole consideration, and the ethics of AI is a whole career on its own. But yeah, there is some really interesting things happening with the technology.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing your story, sharing your time, your career pathway. Like, we love to hear from industry experts, especially when, you know, it isn't just like this is exactly what I wanted to do and I got there, which is okay too. Sometimes you have a path and you follow it and you're successful in it, but also really interesting to hear, you know, here are the challenges and here's where I got, and here's when I transitioned. This is what I'm doing now. And these are the people who inspired me. So thank you so much for sharing your time here. I do have some like rapid fire questions, or, you know, as long as you want to answer them really.
I'm good.
So the first one is your job environment friendly? How do you find that job environment in machine learning or in geology, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I think I touched on it a tiny bit. My role in geoscience was energy development, and I was, there is a social need for energy, so balancing that requirement in honestly the most ethical and environmentally responsible place, arguably globally, is a pretty darn good place to do that. But yes, it has risks, of course. So managing, balancing those with the outcome, that was always very important to me. But sometimes what we don't actually think about in tech is, you know, we have our computer on our desktop, and or we've got our mobile device or whatever, and there is a footprint to that. And it's something we absolutely have to be aware of. It's naive to think that we can use computers and technology without having an environmental impact. And it comes in multiple ways. The raw resources themselves to build our technology, especially the batteries, requires an extensive amount of mining. And so there is a footprint there. When we move into actually talking about machine learning itself, it uses a lot of energy. And that's a really big topic in digital currency.
Crypto.
Yeah. So crypto, the biggest balance for them when you're talking about like crypto miners is actually, as the energy consumption that I'm using worth any increase in value that I'm getting by doing this process? And machine learning is actually kind of similar. In order to do machine learning, we are processing potentially millions or billions of points of data, and we're doing a lot of calculations over and over and over and over again. So when you get into these huge, massive models that can take days, weeks, potentially months, to train, the energy to run that infrastructure is worth capturing as a line item when you're evaluating those projects. So yes, it is definitely something to keep aware of. There's things that you can do to mitigate that. And that comes in your data processing. What data am I collecting? How am I storing it? What do I need to store? If I'm storing it in the cloud, am I storing it in a place that is more environmentally friendly than another place, right? Like if you have a server room somewhere where it's 40 degrees versus somewhere you can put it that it's 10 degrees on a regular basis, there might actually be significant energy savings there. So there's a whole side to the tech industry that does have an environmental footprint. And that's a good point leading into the jobs of the future, is that I think that will actually become more and more prominent on helping our tech ecosystem to be as environmentally friendly as we can. So yeah.
Thank you for the thoughtful response on that one. I didn't think that was going to be such a dive deep, but obviously there's some considerations there. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's a fabulous question. And I'm thrilled to see that our young people are thinking about that question. So whoever asked that, like, gold star. And I appreciate it, because the future's in your hands. So keep it in mind. Absolutely.
Next question is the pros and cons of working in the tech industry. More personal question, I guess. What do you find as a pro? What do you find as a con?
There's so many, and I think it is absolutely individual dependent. I'll go a little bit universally. Some of the pros are you can do whatever you want. Tech is in everything, so you pick an industry and you do it, buddy. Right now, I was just, before this, I was actually just took a really quick look through what postings are out there right now, who's hiring, who's doing what. There's stuff with Hockey Canada, there's stuff with Spotify, there's stuff with Shopify, there's stuff with medical companies, startups doing really cool stuff in Alberta. There is rail companies, there are grocery companies, agriculture. Even energy always has different tech positions. It is everywhere. Everything from your little startup business that just needs a simple website to entire enterprise, full scale commercial, like your global companies, right? Like your Pepsi Cola or your energy companies, Shell, your Exxons, all those types of things, and everything in between. So that's one of the big pros, is you can do it in any industry. Whatever your passion there is, you can probably blend technology with it in some form. There are a lot of remote opportunities. I know that's a big word right now, the work from home thing, but tech has always been a little bit more that way, where people from different places have been linked into supporting companies much farther than where you physically live, which is really great. And you also have the ability to have a little bit more flexibility if you are in person. You know what, I'm going to take 3 weeks and I'm going to be on vacation for 1 week. And I'm going to work from the other 2 weeks while my partner takes after the kids or whatever, right? So there's a lot of flexibility there. Pay can be a pro depending on what you're doing. There's a lot of potential for controlling your own wage. If you're doing freelancing or contracting, you can set your rate. If you are worth it and people want you, they will pay it. Everywhere from your minimum wage up to some jobs in machine learning are $200,000 a year on a salary. So wage can be a big pro. Some of the cons, technology changes and it changes quickly. So keeping up with technology, some people find that challenging because it does change. The systems, the current most in-demand language can change a little bit. It is constantly evolving. So keeping up with the tech, even if you're in tech, can be a bit of a challenge. one of the other drawbacks I've found personally is you'll hear a lot about like agile, and it is a fantastic framework for project management, but it actually becomes quite rigid. So there can actually be a lot more structure in some roles in some teams than what you might expect. And that's because there's really short deadlines on a lot of stuff. So there is a lot of pressure to get stuff out continually on a very consistent, must meet the next phase of the client's goals. And so that can be a pro or a con, depending on how you work. If you like that, you like those constant deadlines and working towards that goalpost, that might be a great fit for you. But if that's going to wear you down a little bit and make you exhausting, you might want to look for a slightly different style. Machine learning doesn't always look like that because the projects are often a lot longer. So it's not quite always that same rigidness. So pro or con, depending how you're looking at it.
True.
Another pro is the community. The tech community is fabulous. People love to support each other. There's lots of groups. If you are female identifying and you want to code with other females, there are groups that go out and do that together. There's like beers with guys if you are specifically looking for something like that. There's lots of communities that come together and do it around specific things, and you can find a group for anything. You can find a group for Python, you can find a group for C++, you can find a group for R if you're into using R like more of a an academic data analysis specialty. There's groups for all kinds of things. So that's a big pro. There's lots of funding as well. The government is being very supportive of tech startups. So if you have a really great idea and you can, a way to show the potential of it, you can usually get a good head start. So that's a huge advantage as well.
That transferability of skills that you mentioned is just so important, because one thing we try to really push in our program is, you know, no matter what industry you go into, there's always going to be some level of digital, whether it be, you know, like pure tech or something that is just like you're just touching it. Having those skill sets, you can jump around pretty much any industry you want. There's always an IT department in every single company, whether it be like AHS, you know, you don't think of AHS as a huge doctor, nurse, massive, huge IT department, right? So all those components where, you know, even if you're just touching tech or you're pure tech, having those skill sets are super, super important. And Calgary is really growing into a tech hub. You know, we talked about it 5 years ago, maybe not, but now every day is just growing and growing every day faster. So
yeah, it's really exciting.
Super exciting. Last question is, what was your first job ever?
My first job ever?
Yeah.
I've been working for a long time.
I always share my first job, you know, minimum wage job, working at Superstore at produce, and just starting there while I was in high school and university, and then, you know, moving on to different careers. But that's where I started.
I think my very first time I got paid for anything, and I think we half got paid in candy, was being a instructor at a hockey school. I think that was my very first legit job. I think I was around grade 6 or so. So
hockey instructor to machine learning expert in your career pathway so far. So pretty cool to share.
Yeah.
But that's it for the questions I have. Is there any questions from the audience or campers that I've yet to mention that you really want to ask Nicole while we have her here? Okay, we have portfolio ideas. Yeah.
That's a great question. For getting into school, or for freelancing, or for being hired, or all of the above?
Cam, do you want to
hire freelancing? Yeah. Okay, so I would tailor it specifically to what you're interested in at the time. If you have multiple interests, separate them. But if you want to build websites, build a website. Make it your website about you and have links to some of the projects that you've done. They might not be like real projects, but they could just be things that you've put together. But yes, absolutely, portfolios are an incredible resource when you are talking to clients and hiring managers, because we don't all start. I certainly didn't, as a pure tech person, start with a job history, right? On my resume, like I couldn't put like built so-and-so's website and they get 10,000 hits a month or something, right? Like I couldn't put that because that wasn't true, but I could show them the front end that I built in Python for a simple little thing that I'd done for a nonprofit. We were doing a fundraiser, so I built a quick little website and it linked into a payment thing, and it was like pick one of three things and make a purchase. And then said thank you. Like it's super simple, right? But it was something that you could show that, yeah, you do indeed want to. You had the drive in the first place to learn the skills, use them, figure out what you did wrong, fix it, and make it work. Third step being really key in programming. But yeah, portfolio is huge. If you're talking about the machine learning specifically, absolutely make a portfolio of projects that you've done. Pick something. You can get data in a bajillion different places. There's all sorts of public data on websites like Kaggle. You can join competitions. You can download data and do your own analysis. Keep those notebooks. Make a portfolio. You can use something like GitHub. It's free. It's accessible to whoever you want it to be, and you can show folks your style. How good are you at communicating? That's another big thing. Are you commenting your code so that people can explain what you've done and so that you can make changes if you need to? Can you make a branch and update your code? Do you have a README section that tells the user what your code does and any things to be aware of when they're using it, how to install it on your computer, stuff like that. So it's not just necessarily about your code, it's the whole package. And that's what some clients and employers are looking for. And that's why a portfolio can do such a great job in filling that niche to show your potential and your value to a potential client or employer. Fabulous question. If anyone has portfolios, happy to take a peek. I love seeing stuff like that. That's a great question. Do it is the short answer.
Awesome. Any other questions there, Cam? No. Okay. So I think we covered all our bases. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your time and just sharing your story here. I think I've really, learned a lot about machine learning. I thought I knew a little bit. Now I know a little bit more, which is
awesome.
I think, we had some great questions for the campers. So thank you there for also putting your questions in. Any parting words there, Nicole?
If you're interested in computers, if you want to know what's going on behind the scenes, take a peek. It's all there and it's at your fingertips. It's incredible and you can use it for the rest of your life. So go for it.
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much, Nicole. I appreciate your time and hope to talk to you soon.
Good luck.